The floorboards in my grandfather's attic didn't just creak, they groaned like old iron under strain. I was 17, left alone in the drafty Victorian house for the summer while my parents sorted out the estate paperwork. Grandfather had been an archivist, a man who spent his life cataloging lost manuscripts, locked chests, and forgotten relics. When he vanished 3 weeks ago without leaving a trace, the police called it a routine missing persons case. But they hadn't seen the study on the top floor. It was a circular room jammed with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, brass telescopes, and maps painted on dried parchment. In the center sat his heavy mahogany desk. That morning, while sweeping away dust, my toe kicked something hard beneath the low-hanging rug. Pulling the frayed carpet back, I found a circular brass plate embedded directly into the oak floorboards. It had 3 rotating concentric rings marked with strange, raised symbols, and in the very center, a keyhole shaped like a flame. My heart pounded against my ribs. I had lived in this house every summer for a decade, yet I had never noticed the brass plate. Beside it lay a small leather pocket notebook bound with a tarnished buckle. I unclasped it, my fingers trembling. The pages were filled with grandfather's precise, cramped handwriting. The final entry, dated the night he disappeared, was short. If the cipher is turned to the midnight equinox, the mechanism will drop. Do not open it without the brass flame. They are already watching the perimeter. I looked toward the rain-slicked window. Below, at the edge of the dark pine forest that bordered the property, a tall figure in a heavy gray coat stood completely still, staring up at the attic window. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked behind the desk, cold sweat prickling my neck. Who were they? How long had that person been standing at the treeline? Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the brass key ring grandfather had given me on my 15th birthday. Among the rusted house keys was a small ornament I'd always assumed was just a decorative charm, a flat piece of polished brass shaped like a flicking flame. I looked at the floor plate, then back at the window. The shadow in the trees took 3 slow steps forward. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the key. I slid the brass flame into the central slot. It fit with an audible, heavy click. Guided by the notebook's instructions, I grabbed the outer brass rings and aligned the symbols, a crescent moon, a stylized sun, and an hourglass, into a single vertical line. A deep, grinding sound resonated through the floorboards. The brass plate sank 2 inches down, and a section of the wooden floor flipped open like a trapdoor, revealing a narrow, spiral staircase leading into utter darkness. A cold, damp draft rushed upward, carrying the smell of crushed pine needles and ancient iron. Glancing out the window once more, I saw the figure in the gray coat broke into a swift, silent run toward the front porch. There was no time to think. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the desk, pulled the trapdoor half shut behind me, and scrambled down the narrow iron steps into the dark. The staircase descended far deeper than the house's foundation should have allowed. Countless steps echoed under my sneakers until my feet hit solid stone. I swung the flash beam around. I was standing in a vaulted stone tunnel carved directly into the bedrock beneath the forest. The air was frigid, freezing my breath into faint clouds. Along the walls were ancient alcoves filled with clay jars and iron canisters. Every 10 yards, a strange emblem was etched into the rock, an eye encased inside a gear. I followed the tunnel as it sloped downward, guided only by the fading beam of my light. After 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. In the center of the cavern stood a massive stone pillar covered in intricate gearwork that ticked with a slow, heavy rhythm, like the heartbeat of a giant clock. Suspended in the middle of the pillar, locked inside a sphere of thick glass, was a glowing cylinder filled with a swirling, silver liquid that defied gravity. A sharp snap echoed from the tunnel behind me. Footsteps were descending the spiral stairs, fast, deliberate, and heavy. Someone had found the trapdoor. Panic flared in my chest. I darted behind a moss-covered stone pillar, switching off my flashlight to plunge myself into total darkness. The underground chamber became dead silent, save for the mechanical tick-tick-tick of the giant stone pillar. A faint beam of white light cut through the gloom at the mouth of the tunnel. A man stepped into the chamber. He wore a damp gray overcoat, his face shadowed beneath a low-brimmed hat. In his left hand, he held a sleek silver device that emitted a soft, high-pitched hum, sweeping it across the stone walls like a scanner. "I know you're down here, kid," the man said. His voice was low, rasping like sandpaper. "Your grandfather thought he was clever, hiding the Chronos core beneath an old farmhouse. But he ran out of time, and so have you." I pressed my back hard against the stone, holding my breath. My mind raced. Chronos core? What was this place? Grandfather was just an archivist, he restored old books, not ancient subterranean machines. "The device doesn't belong to your family," the stranger continued, his footsteps crunching slowly on the loose gravel as he approached the central pillar. "It's a power source built before the turn of the century. Your grandfather took something that belongs to the syndicate, and if you hand over his research notes, you might actually walk out of here." He stopped directly in front of the glass sphere. The silver hum from his scanner grew louder, flickering rapidly. He reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy steel wrench, raising it to shatter the glass casing holding the swirling silver cylinder. I knew if he broke that glass, whatever was inside would be lost forever, and with it, any clue to finding my grandfather. Spotting a loose, fist-sized rock at my feet, I grabbed it and threw it with all my strength toward the far corner of the cavern. The stone crashed loudly against a stack of clay jars. The stranger spun around, raising a lantern toward the noise. Taking advantage of the distraction, I sprinted from behind the pillar, grabbed a heavy iron rod lying near the machinery, and stepped into the light. "Step away from the pillar," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. The stranger slowly turned around. Under the light, his face was pale, marked by a jagged scar running from his ear down to his collar. A cold smile spread across his lips. "You've got your grandfather's temper," he muttered. "But you don't have his knowledge." Before I could react, he lunged forward with unbelievable speed. He grabbed the iron rod, wrenching it from my grip, and shoved me backward. I hit the cold floor hard, knocking the wind from my lungs. The stranger didn't come after me, though. Instead, he swung his heavy wrench against the glass sphere holding the silver cylinder. Crack! Webs of fractured lines spread across the glass. But instead of shattering, the sphere burst into a bright beam of blue light that projected onto the high cavern ceiling. It wasn't just light, it was a holographic map. Lines of glowing blue ink traced the geography of our town, highlighting 3 specific locations marked with burning red symbols: the old lighthouse, the abandoned granite quarry, and the town hall subterranean vaults. The stranger stared up at the ceiling in awe. "So that's where he hid the remaining keys," he whispered to himself. Realizing the stranger was distracted, I scrambled to my feet. Beside the base of the pillar sat an iron control panel with a large lever. Without thinking, I pulled the lever down. A loud metallic shriek echoed through the cavern. Heavy iron grates dropped from the ceiling, slamming down between the central pillar and the entrance tunnel, effectively walling off the stranger from where I stood near the back exit. "You fool!" the man yelled, rattling the heavy iron bars that now separated us. "You don't know what you've activated. You've started the sequence." The glowing map on the ceiling began to flash rapidly, turning from bright blue to a deep, alarming crimson. Beneath my feet, the ground began to tremble violently. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran down the narrow escape passage behind the pillar, guided only by the flashing crimson light reflecting off the walls. The tunnel sloped upward sharply, ending at a rusted metal ladder. I climbed as fast as I could, pushing open a heavy trapdoor at the top. I tumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. I was in the middle of the pine woods, a quarter-mile away from the house. Behind me, the ground settled, the rumbling fading into silence. Pulling grandfather's notebook from my jacket, I flipped through the pages with a small penlight. The blue map on the ceiling had shown 3 locations. The first marked spot, the old, decommissioned cliffside lighthouse, matched a drawing on the very next page of his journal. Next to the drawing, he had written, "The first seal must be turned before the 3rd moon. If the syndicate reaches the optic lens first, the vault will seal forever." I checked my watch. It was 1:15 a.m. The lighthouse was 2 miles down the coast, abandoned since the late 1940s. I hiked through the dense woods toward the coast, the sound of crashing waves growing louder as I neared the rocky cliffs. The old iron lighthouse towered against the dark, cloudy sky like a black needle. Its glass lantern room at the top was usually dark, but as I emerged from the treeline, my heart skipped a beat. A faint, golden light was flickering inside the top of the tower. Someone was already up there. I hurried to the heavy wooden door at the base of the tower. It was standing slightly ajar, the lock snapped off cleanly. I pushed the door open, step by step ascending the rusted iron spiral staircase inside. With every step, the sound of rhythmic mechanical clicking grew louder. When I reached the top platform, I stopped dead in my tracks. Standing in the center of the lantern room, adjusting a complex array of mirrors pointed toward the ocean, was my grandfather. "Grandfather?" I whispered, afraid that if I spoke too loudly, the image would shatter. The old man spun around, his thick gray hair wild and his coat stained with soot. Relief swept over his worn face, followed immediately by deep concern. "Leo, what are you doing here? It isn't safe." A man in a gray coat raided the attic, I said, stepping into the room. "I found the underground chamber, the map, the silver core." He called it the Chronos core. "Grandfather, what is going on?" Grandfather quickly locked the heavy trapdoor behind me. "The core isn't a weapon, Leo. It's an archival engine, a vault designed to store the sum of human history before it's erased. The Syndicate wants to control it to alter records, to rewrite past events for their own power. I had to fake my disappearance to draw them away from you." He pointed to the center of the lantern room. In place of the old light bulb sat a massive crystal lens, glowing with the same silver light I had seen in the underground chamber. "The map you saw beneath the house was a countdown," Grandfather explained, his hands adjusting the brass dials beneath the lens. "When you pulled that lever, you activated the alignment sequence. All 3 coastal towers must be aligned before dawn, or the core's data will corrupt permanently." Suddenly, the glass windows of the lantern room shattered inward with a deafening crash. Cold wind and sea spray rushed into the room. Standing on the exterior catwalk, holding an iron grappling hook, was the stranger in the gray coat. "End of the line, old man," the stranger sneered, stepping through the broken frame. "Hand over the cipher key, or neither of you leaves this tower." Grandfather looked at me, then down at the notebook in my hand. "Leo," he murmured calmly, "the flame key you carry, it doesn't just open doors. It unlocks the alignment wheel." I looked down at the brass flame key still clutched tightly in my hand. The stranger took a step forward, raising his steel rod. "Do it now, Leo," Grandfather shouted. I looked at the brass slot on the central console, then back at the approaching shadow.